Well, thank you very much, Joe. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Well, all right. What would you like to talk about?
Just a little bit of everything. Obviously, the book I received as a gift for my birthday a couple of days ago,
Well,
and
this one?
yeah, this one, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's it's been doing quite well. It's on Amazon and it's not too expensive. They priced it down pretty good.
No, I was really happy to receive it because when you see a book like this about a particular film, you think, oh, it's just going to be concept art. There's no kind of narrative to it. But I think what Dennis and yourself have achieved with the book, it gives a real story of the making of, which is fantastic, I think.
Yeah, Al, we did a first version. Catalina Island had a Jaws exhibit in their museum for 6 months. And he did a paperback, thinner than this. It had a great display of Jaws things. Greg Nicotero, who does The Walking Dead, and they manufacture. He has the three characters that they made. I mean, with hair on their and fantastic. And I had some of my originals. So that was quite good. And then Dennis got Titan to make a new one and hardcover, and they
It's
started to lay it
beautiful,
out.
yeah.
And Dennis took over, but he did things in here that sort of surprised me, like this is something you never see. This is a way we used to break down a designer
Yeah.
gets a script, or anybody else, prop man, and you go through scene by scene and see what is in your department that you need to do. So he did that. He got that, and there's other stuff in here, like oh, this is I did the sculpted the first shark, a 4-foot one, and I got an ichthyologist to work with me,
Oh,
and then
brilliant,
we
yeah.
had detailed drawings. So basically, what this book does that most books don't do. Most books about movies are generally about the director, writer, actors, not too much about the people on the other side of the
Absolutely.
camera. And so it's not really so much about me, but the people involved, my crew.
Yeah, you refer to them as Magnificent Seven, don't you? You're the kind of the crew close to you.
Yeah. I mean, Bob Matty, Roy Arbogast, the Wood Brothers had put together a team, and I had an ichthyologist, Leonard Campagno, that worked with me to get accurate and talk with Ron and Valerie Taylor from Australia, who were
Oh, they shot the live action stuff, didn't they?
shot to live action. And so I would talk to them. And Valerie would look at some of our test footage and say, Joe, you don't have to move the shark so much because they don't go like that. They go like that until they strike.
Yeah.
So I had really good information, and so that was quite an experience. Normally, as a production designer, you could oversee these things, um, but as I did the preliminary storyboards, not the storyboards, but the illustrations before Stephen was on, based on the galley sheets. And we had a meeting with I've told the story before, Marshall Green's office. But the bottom line was, Universal Effects Department said that they couldn't make it, would take a year and a half, and they were doing the Hindenburg, was his bigger movie. So Marshall said, Joe, take it off the lot and do it. And normally everything in the studio system was done on the lot, they did all their effects.
Everything within like the four
that
walls.
structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was quite unusual to put me in charge of finding somebody that could make it, getting the team together, researching. And so I had pretty much total control, and which is good, but also bad, because if it doesn't work, they blame you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact it wasn't working is because we started this process in the last months of 73, I would say, started construction probably late November, December, and 74, February, the book came out and the studio wanted to start shooting immediately to take advantage of the book.
Yeah.
So basically, and I have to defend this, Bob and his crew didn't have a year and a half. They had months before, and so we would go test it, basically. And I would tell Stephen, if it works, shoot it. If it doesn't, it's a test. And so people on the other side, the executives were getting upset because it took so long. And how come it's not working? Well, because you started the movie a year before you should have,
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't want to take any blame,
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the early parts of the pre-production I wanted to ask you about was the location scouting. Is that something you were part of in terms of the production and dressing Martha's Vineyard?
Exactly. The production designer, art director, it was the same title. Now everybody uses art production designer. You're responsible for all the visuals, whether it's a location or you have to build the sets. On a big production, you generally have a location manager that goes with you. So you find something you like, and then they go do the technical things, find out who owns it, what they want for it, and blah, blah, blah. On Jaws, since I started before Stephen, just based on the galley sheets, before there was a script, and then Stephen came aboard. So then while I got Bob Maddy and his team building it, Stephen started working with, Peter Benchley wrote the first script, but then he got Carl Gottlieb to work on it. So I went and scouted, and basically what I did is I met Peter Benchley in New York, and I asked him where did he visualized his book.
Yeah.
And he had Covington, South Harbor, some places on the East Coast. And so, and he said his parents live in Nantucket, which is off the coast there, off of Massachusetts. Anyway, so I took a map of the coast, and I just started traveling everything along the coast. And I needed two things. I needed a little village, and I also needed a bay with an open view and 25 feet of depth. This is for the shark.
Oh, the mechanism, yeah.
That would sink, And I've told this many times, people know this. So basically, I needed a small tide, 2-foot tide, something like that. On the West Coast, there are big tides, they're 12 feet. So, if the tide's too big, you can't get the shark up. If it's too low, you see all the mechanisms. Basically, I scouted everything, and it was all covered with snow, all the beaches. This was December.
Right.
And eventually I went to Nantucket to see his parents, and the weather was so bad, the boat turned around. And then, because I asked Peter, I said, what about this island? What about Martha's Vineyard? He had never been there, but he didn't think there was much there. So I went there because I couldn't get the boat to Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard was close, and I went there, and it was perfect. Vineyard Haven.
Yeah. So the the early, I think it's the second or third scene where Brody leaves the police station, and there's the music playing, and he speaks to the mayor a couple of times. Did you do much with the sets or locations there to kind of dress them at all?
Well, we did all everything was done pretty much there.
Yeah.
I didn't, the sets I built were pretty much Quint's shack and the boat. And the only thing we did in LA was we shot in a tank at MGM, used to be the Esther Williams tank. We shot the underwater stuff with the cage, and we shot a lake. It was all foggy at night. Dreyfuss goes down and he finds the bone, and then the head sticks out,
Yeah.
But everything else was pretty much shot on the vineyard.
Oh, fantastic. Just before we continue, I just wanted to thank Gabby for arranging this, because I sent her a couple of messages and she was really, really nice to speak to on Instagram.
Yeah, too bad she's not here. She may pop in,
Yeah, it was just really nice that to see you to see some photographs of you sculpting on Instagram as well. I think she's posted a few
Yeah.
things on there. Yeah. I just wanted to kind of just take it back a little bit. And one of our questions we've had, because we started this horror festival called Hellbound, is how did you start? What did you start to draw when you were young, and how did you kind of get started in the business?
I could always draw. I was born with a club foot. And so when I was growing up, I wasn't too physical. I had to wear a brace, but I did spend a lot of time drawing. I could remember in the fourth grade, I drew all the seven dwarfs, and they displayed them, and they were pretty good. So that was my thing. It was art and music. I played the piano, had a little combo. Um, and so I tell this story because it really, there was a girl who lived up the street, Shirley. She wasn't a girlfriend, but just a good friend. And we went down to an early evening show of American in Paris. And Gene Kelly and Leslie Caron.
Yeah.
And we were and I love to dance. Even though my leg got better, I could dance. My older sisters, we were just dancing. And then I found out that it wasn't made in Paris. It was all in the back lot, MGM, and in Cedric Gibbons and the art directors, and that's what they did. And I thought, boy, that would be a great thing to do, is to work in films and create those images. I mean, you're really fooling the people because you're saying, I'm in Paris. No, you're not. You're in the back lot.
Yeah, exactly.
And, so basically, my first year of college, I studied architecture because that's what you have to, that. And I studied drama. So I was in, plays. So I was trying to combine drama and architecture. That would be what set designers did.
Yeah.
And then I I graduated high school really young. I just turned 17 a month. I was, so my first year in college, I was 17. Then I came down to LA, wanted to get into, and I went to Chenard's Art Institute, and they did specialize in production designing movies. And
fantastic.
You had to do architectural things, and, so basically as a designer, you start off in the studio system. Now people just start off as production designers or art directors, the same thing. But you start off either as a architectural draftsman, which designing the system, or an illustrator that you do storyboards or illustrate what the set's going to look like. And then, so those are two departments. And I started as a set designer, but
is that something, how did that lead into kind of your first TV gig?
My first thing, of course, was working at Disney's on the id for I forget the movie now. I'm losing it.
Wasn't Forbidden Planet, was it?
Forbidden Planet, yes. And I drew the id, and that was just real freaky because I got a summer job, and everybody I was working for got sick, went to the hospital. I ended up assisting Josh Metter, who was a top effects animator, and that I did that in a few months, and normally it takes years to become an assistant. But what happened when I left Disney, I wanted to get a live action, so I basically worked at a little theater called the Hollywood Playhouse, and we did plays, and so I did the sets, and I built up a portfolio, and then basically you got a portfolio, you applied to the union, and you walked around, and they said, okay, there's people they're hiring at MGM. So you go there as a junior set designer, and I was drawing parts of the boat for Mutiny on the Bounty and things. So you graduate from that after so many times. Then I ended up at Universal, became a senior, and then I worked on It's a Mad, Mad World with Stanley Kramer.
Yeah, great movie.
And then I was fortunate to become assistant art director, and worked with some really good art directors that really taught me what to do. Frank Arrigo was my sort of mentor, and See, came with Review. Review came over to Universal in 1960. And in 66, then they merged. So then you had the television
Yeah.
and the feature guys, because it used to be separated. There used to be a real, oh, you're just a television guy. Oh, you're a feature guy. But with Frank, he was a television guy, but he had directed some television while he was there before, coming to Universal. So he really taught me sort of how to design as a director, rather than just worry about little architectural details.
It's almost like with the story in mind at the same time.
Exactly. Here's a set. What do we need? Well, they're looking out this window and they say, okay, so we would need really an imposing window, and there's little doors over here. So that's how you do it. So we were fortunate. We did the thing called Change the Habit, Elvis Presley's last movie.
Oh, wow.
And then we got Torn Curtain.
Yeah, I have to ask you about that. What was the experience like on that? And working with, because you've worked with some absolutely fantastic directors.
Well, yeah, Hitchcock was really interesting. Hein Heckroff was a German production designer that he brought to do the ballet sequence. But basically, Frank and I did most of the sets. And we would have coffee with donuts, on the set, and he would be there drinking his coffee and telling us very bad jokes. And everybody, he wore a black suit and tie.
Yeah, absolutely.
We wore sport coats, and it was quite different than the Spielberg years where everybody got T-shirts and jeans.
Yeah.
So I had a situation with him. Frank was in Hein were someplace, and Peggy, his assistant, called me. Said, "Mr. Hitchcock wants to talk to you, Joe." And I'm going, "Me? Why not Frank?" No, he's asked for you. So I go there, and he said, "Okay, Joe." He says, he lays out the set. This is the way the guy was. Because he used to be an art director when he was in England.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, because I've explained this before. Mr. Newman runs to the stairway and runs down the stairs. You build the stairway. Al Whitlock is going to do a matte shot and paint that matte there. Then he comes off the stairs and he goes over to the registration desk, signs up and leaves. And so I said, okay, so then I build the registration desk. And he says, yes. And he drew this thing. It was like a worm crawling over a page. He never lifted his hands, it was just drew the thing for me. So I said, well, what about a reverse shot? What about over here where it leaves? No, just build what I need. And Alec, that is unique. Very few directors do that. Most of them just say, build the whole thing, and then I'll shoot what I need or what I want. And you end up with a lot of stuff you don't see.
Yeah. I'll say he was very, very efficient with his sets as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And I heard you on another interview talking about working with John Carpenter on Escape from New York, and it was a very similar process.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I did a podcast earlier. And Carpenter was that same way, financially making small movies, like Halloween. So he, you would give him this much, and that's what he would shoot. I remember saying on this other podcast, I built the section of chock full of nuts, a building, and we built it in the desert because we couldn't afford a stage. And if you panned over here, there'd be cactus, But he was very disciplined. He was very happy to get what he got, and he would use it. Other directors, here's the thing. When I did Night Gallery, we started off the season would be 2, 3, sometimes episodes in an hour. And the first year, they would have a different director for each episode. So I'd be running around building sets and showing them, and they had very little time. So they pretty much had to shoot what I gave them, But I got used to the concept of designing and building it pretty much how I thought it should be shot. Jeannot Shork was a very interesting director. He would take what I did, and he had a way of improving it slightly. And I thought quite a bit of him. And when they fired the first director, they needed a director for Jaws 2. I suggested that they look at him. So
so that's
yes.
so your understanding of that experience in television really helped you get the best out of those small budgets as well as the huge budgets as well.
Television is great, and it's better now. I mean, even now, there's so much television.
Yeah.
And it was a thinking process. Well, we used a lot of, it was at the studio. There were a lot of existing sets. So you'd go in there and say, okay, what the producer used to do is give me a stack of scripts and say, how many is there in these scripts? Are there any shows that you could use the same set and just revamp it? So we could schedule it that way. In other words, so you could just redress it or repaint it and do it the next week. So Jack Laird was the producer. So my mind of designing sets, it was easy. By the time I started doing television, we did a lot of television movies, and so that was pretty much build a little bit, grab what you can, and they had incredible stock units. In other words, big staircases. There was a staircase, it was on stage 27. I had Vincent Price come down that on one thing, and then I used it for something else. So you had all these facilities. You don't have that now,
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, no, stage 42, they've got a thing there. If I revamp that,
Didn't they do this? Didn't they do the same thing with the Spanish version and the American version of Dracula as well? I think they used entirely the same sets. I think.
Could have, yes.
Yeah. So what was? Did you? This might be an obvious question now, but what was it like when you started on Sugarland Express and your first kind of working relationship with Steven Spielberg? Was that? Was it? Obviously, it was a positive experience because you worked on at least 3 films with him. So what was that experience like?
Well, I had worked with him on, the first thing was Night Gallery. He did an episode of Night Gallery.
Oh,
then there was a show called The Psychiatrist, and he did 2 of the 6. So we got to know each other. Now, with Steven, on his first films, or early films, he was a filmmaker when he was a kid. So he was used to doing everything, finding where to shoot, put the camera, this and that. The experience on Sugarland was interesting. We drove all over Texas finding different locations. And I just remember one instant, Bill Gilmore was the production manager, who ended up becoming the production manager on Jaws, who was really responsible for getting everything to work, because he sort of ignored all the pressures from the studio. But we would drive along and I would see a spot and I'd say stop, and I'd say to him, I remember this specifically, I said, Steven, we're down here and the whole trail of cars is up here and Goldie comes down here, so you could see that, and then you could see her. And Bill would say, and yeah, we're only 30 minutes away from the base, which means you're not losing a lot of shooting time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we got back, and Steven said, I'm sort of bothered because I feel like I'm stealing from you guys. And it wasn't that, it was that he just wasn't used to working as a group. And I think was to his, he really got used to that, like, oh, okay. Now, he's not relying on me to show him how to make the movie, but I said, look, I'll make suggestions, and I'll make 5 of them or whatever, and you choose what you like best. And it's like showing them locations. And so I said, basically, that's what we do is we make suggestions and you choose what you want.
Is that something, do you think that's something that, because obviously he gave you some second unit work on Jaws as well, because it's that shot of Alex Kintner being,
yes, with the
that was one of the parts you shot. Is that right?
Yes, I did that. some of the barrel things, and Verna feels just who won the editing award for that. The interesting thing, yeah, Stephen was. I got to tell you, the crew was really getting tired, and I got to tell you, I was fortunate. I had the office. I'd go back. I'd do storyboards, talk with Stephen. So we planned every shot that was on the boat. And it sort of upsets me when people say, "Oh, we didn't use the shark much because it wasn't working." Definitely not true. Everything in the book, you see all that shot, Jaws.
You can tell by the storyboards that you were really efficient with what you were shooting, because shot for shot, and I'll show you my favorite shot in, I think it's the second barrel that goes in. Let's see if I can show you. I'm just going to move my little notes out of the way. This shot here, it's not this, I'll lift this up. It's a tight shot of the shark going past when Quint's just got the headband on. This one here.
Oh yeah,
it's a tight shot. I absolutely love that shot. Because
yeah,
everyone's exhausted on the boat. And when I started to look through this book, which is fantastic for the storyboards especially, you can tell that you were like because we're seeing it retrospectively, the storyboards, people can now see, okay, when they read this book and look at these visuals, they can see all that kind of, that urban legend of, it wasn't ever working, is complete nonsense.
Well, yeah, and they say, well, we only use the barrels because the shark didn't work. Absolutely not. If you look at the early concept sketches before we had a script, there's barrels, because they talk about, and I painted them yellow. They're normally black, but that's a Hitchcock thing. The barrel comes up, boom. Where's the shark? Well, you know where the shark is. If the barrel comes up, it's attached to that. Yeah. So that was what Stephen was trying to do. The same thing when Chrissy gets it. She's being waked around. Why didn't you use the shark? No, too early. We didn't want to see the shark at that time. And when the wharf goes off and turns around, well, you know it's turning around.
Oh, I've got to talk about that scene. The holiday, my wife's holiday roast. I love that scene. It's one of my favorites because it, like you say, it's the barrels again. When that turns around and John Williams's music comes in, it's a beautiful moment. And when it was when there was an edition, I think it was the late 90s, one of the re-releases, they cleaned up and you could see a lot more detail in some of those scenes, especially the Chrissy Watkins and that particular scene. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to see that it was all meant to be in terms of the subtlety to it.
Yeah, it's been years and years, 45 years. And I must say this, and I've said it recently, when they had the Catalina show, and we're going to see it on the big screen outside, and they had an amphitheater there, and the lady that runs the museum, she introduced me, and I figured, well, I don't need to see this movie again. And then she said, and then Joe's going to talk about it after the movie. So as I was walking, my wife said, we got a seat right here. So I watched the movie. Now, I watched the movie without thinking about my stuff, about if the shark worked or didn't work. It was so far, that was all as I was concerned. They're going to laugh at the shark, whatever. But what Stephen did with the three characters is what made that movie. I mean, absolutely. Shaw, Dreyfus, those guys going at each other, and Scheider, who didn't want to be on that damn boat. He just didn't come. They were comfortable. They loved being out at the sea for different reasons. Yeah. One is an ichthyologist who wanted to study the sharks and stuff, and the other guy wanted to catch them. So I realized what an incredible movie it was, just from the dramatic relationships. It had nothing to do with the shark. The shark worked. I mean, I love the shark. One of my favorite shots is the shark coming into the cabin.
Oh yeah, it's a very. I heard you talk about the design of that and how you got it to work and that sequence. There's some early concept stuff and where you've got Hooper inside the cage. And that scene you're talking about, when the window breaks and he comes through, it feels he's completely naked. There's no barrier. He's done. He's done. And it's the same thing when that mouth goes inside the cage, and he's got nowhere to go. It's that final connection. Like Brody's done for, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, and after spending so much time in that area with the three guys, suddenly this scene comes in and it occupies all the space.
Yeah.
I mean, you say, "Oh my God, this thing is big."
You get a real sense of scale. There's a shot in when the shark goes into, I think it's called the pond, before the chap in the red boat and Brody's kid falls in the water. When I think it's an artist, she's got a headband, she starts to shout, "Shark, shark." There's a very quick shot of the tail fin and the dorsal fin that just sinks in.
Yeah.
And that for me, that's the first shot where you get a sense of scale, and you think, "Oh my God, what is this?"
One of my other favorite shots is one of the first shots that worked, because it was it was a left to right shark, and then I would go ask Bob what's working, and he said maybe the left to right. It's when we're high and we see the shark just going by the boat.
Yeah.
And you see, oh my God, that thing is big. It's almost
absolutely.
as big as the boat,
Because that's one of the most difficult things that I have, and a lot of people do. When you watch a modern film now, the sense of scale, the sense of weight on screen, I think a lot of that is lost when it goes from practical to CG. And there's a sequence in Jurassic Park where the camera goes forward and the torch is moving back and forth during the rain, where it goes from Stan Winston's dinosaur to the CG, and that's obviously with Spielberg's experience. It's a masterpiece in terms of that sequence. So when you see that sense of scale from that high angle of the shark going past, they're like tiny dots on the ocean. Then those guys have got no chance. That's what you think.
Oh, no, absolutely. And what I don't have anything against CG. They just have to be disciplined. They're being more disciplined because they could do it. They make it as so big, or they have 100 sharks, or I use this as an example. John Wayne coming with the cavalry. He's got 25 guys, and 100 Indians appear on and you say, "Oh boy, that means that's going to be pretty difficult, huh?" Well, today they put 100,000 Indians up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lucas did this on one of the Star Wars. He just filled it with creatures, and it was just over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, how many creatures do you need?
Exactly.
But you could do it, and they do things by just reproducing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, this is a bit of an odd one. This is about Escape from New York, because I'm a huge Carpenter fan. And whose idea was it to put the chandeliers on the cars?
It was my idea. And what happened?
I love that. Thank you for that, Joe.
I said, to my decorator, and I said, I want a chandelier in the car. And she appears with these big chandeliers. What the heck are we going to do with these? And so I said, okay, we'll put them on the fender, It was really off the top,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It matched Isaac Hayes' character, though. So that kind of like that use of, what should we do with this? It really matched his character, didn't it?
Yeah, it was sort of over the top, but as you say, it fit his character. And people got really laughed. I think coming down. Well, let me tell you, though, when we started doing chases with that thing, we had to have a lot of extra chandeliers for take two because they would break,
Yeah. What was the kind of design process like for that film, and what was the working relationship like with John Carpenter?
John was, as I say, well, here's first of all, they were low budget filmmakers. And basically the story was, I had directed a lot, 85 Days in Second Unit on Jaws 2. So after that, I wanted to pursue directing, not designing. And I used to race Formula cars, like Formula Two. And so I did a movie. I had a script called Out in Front, and Jim Brolin was going to be the main driver and stuff. So with Bill Gilmore, my friend from Jaws, he was part of a company, and we went and we scouted all over Europe for Formula One. We went to Monte Carlo, went to England, went to the car. They were going to give me a car to use, a mule, they called it. So anyway, I got back. I was very excited to do this thing called Out in Front. And the company folded, or they got sold. And that was very frustrating. And a couple of weeks later, my father died, and it just went into,
Yeah.
this business, you're up, and then you could go really into depth. So he said, Joe, I think this is Phil Gerst, big agent. And he says, I think you should go back to work. I want to introduce you to two young filmmakers, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. So I met them, and we were coming from a total different space. They were used to $300,000 movie. I was used to $25 million movie. And our thinking was different. And John was this sort of laid back, yeah, that's good. He wasn't very forceful. Deborah was quite forceful. We got to get going. So I started breaking things down with, and I said, okay, who's doing the scouting? Where's the locations? Oh, Barry Bernardi. I says, okay, Barry, have you found a bridge yet? Because I need a bridge that nobody uses. I could put a wall. No, I said, well, let's start contacting all the film people, all commissions all over the. So that was a process started, and then there may be a bridge in St. Louis. So we went to St. Louis and we found this bridge, and that was perfect. And I built a 200-foot wall, 35 feet high, and then we found the train station that nobody was using, an old train station that had great texture. And then John and Larry Franco, who was the first assistant, we went to New York, and we went to the Twin Towers, and we looked at New York and said, yeah, that's just too much to deal with, because we were closing off New York, the concept. United States Police.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We found the whole downtown area of St. Louis that they were redoing it, so we could do whatever we wanted there. So that became our base.
Superb,
so we St. Louis, and we just put junk in it, and the same thing with the train station. And we built a big set, the exterior of the police department thing in the San Fernando
dam. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the one story I tell is that we had an entrance pod thing that you walk through, entrance building. And that was just like an A-frame, and you sign in, then you walk through it. And that we built in LA. We put it on a truck, drove it across the country, took the last ferry to Liberty Island, set it up. Tommy Atkins walked down a big pan shot of the Statue of Liberty, walked through there, signed in, and then walked through. And Dean Cundy, who is so incredible,
genius,
one of the best cameramen I ever worked with, he panning across United States Police Force. If he gets to black, he cuts. We ship it back, put it on a truck, go back to LA, set it up. He puts the camera, same distance, and we go from black to black. It comes out, Tommy comes out, and we're in LA. Now, there was no optical, it wasn't an optical shot. It was just a direct cut, black to black. Very, very clever. And that's the way that movie went. It was, okay, I needed an airplane, a wrecked airplane. All right. So it was a jet, the president's jet. And I'm in Arizona, collected all these airplane pieces. And the guy says, there's a DC-8, which is a good sized plane, but a prop plane for sale for like $5,000. I said, oh, where's that? And he says, in St. Louis. So the luck of it. So we bought that, we chopped it up, we snuck it into a location at night so we didn't have to pay all these things. And basically, then, the actor walked in front, and that's the way the thing went. I would set
Yeah.
it up, and John would shoot it. He would, what did I say? He was used to smaller movies, so whatever I gave him, he was pretty happy with.
Was it a similar thing with the wrestling ring scene?
That was interesting. Yeah, we found a location, and what I did is I put like barbed wire, not barbed wire, but fence wire in that, and I've never seen that before, and that's what they use in wrestling things now. All that,
Yeah, absolutely.
link,
Yeah.
chain link. So I thought that was sort of funny because I just did that because I wanted him to be sort of captured in there. And then in recent years after that, I say, oh, they're using that,
Yeah, there's a I don't know where the design came from for the presidential pod that looks like a red egg.
Yeah, but that's it. Yeah, I one that said we needed a pod, so the pod reminded me of an egg, and I painted it orange, and because the president's going to live, in the pod, and yeah, that was sort of fun, and it was just a good contrast, that bright orange and all that darkness. And one thing I got to tell you about Din Kundi, if you look at that movie, you see it's night, but you could see stuff. You see some movies, and when it's dark, it's dark. I mean, you don't see anything.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what is that about? This is movies. It's magical. You got to be able to see in the dark.
It's a beautifully lit film. It really is.
Oh, I think he did such a good job. And,
like some of those shots where Kurt Russell comes from the camera right, and you've got an overturned car, and it's all like scrap metal and rubbish down the street, and the camera pans across. The way that's lit, it's because you see so much detail in it now.
This is the thing. He was able to photograph that movie, and it was dark and moody, but you see people walking off in the distance. And there's so many dark movies. You say, what? What's that? I can't see a damn thing,
Exactly, yeah. And the reason I refer to the pod, it was that idea is used in Air Force One with Harrison Ford, because there's a pod that's fired off out of the plane towards the beginning of the film, but it's never used by him. So it just reminded me when I watched that for the first time with Harrison Ford of Escape from New York with that presidential pod. And yeah, it's a wonderful film. And when you watch the 4K version of it now, it really stands up visually. It's so strong because of your work and Dean Cundy's especially.
Yeah. The 4K this year for Jaws. They called me the early part of the year, Universal, and I did a lot of podcasts to promote their 4K. I haven't looked at it, but I've seen the movie so many times. It's just
the transfer is beautiful. Yeah.
No.
There's a shot of Adrienne Barbeau's character in Escape from New York when she's dead. I think that John said that they needed it from a test screening to confirm that she was dead in a character. Now, the reason I mention that is that was shot, I think, sometime after. Is that right?
Yeah, I think they didn't do a close up of her.
Was that the same process as when you shot in Martha's Vineyard swimming pool in terms of getting that shot of Ben Gardner's head in the boat?
That we did in Verna Field's swimming pool.
Yeah.
And Stephen asked me after the first screening, he says, I could get another screen if you could, So we did, I built two little things because I have a shop. I build a lot of things. I mean, I like to make furniture and stuff. So I'm pretty good with tools. And so we built one little section where it showed me the way to go home where the shark is hitting the boat and they're singing. And then he had a hose. We shot this in my driveway with a hose, camera, and then the head, somebody stole the head out of the makeup department, and we went to Verna's pool and we made a hull with a little hole. And I got to tell you, so the second screen, well, Zanuck and Brown, the studio didn't know we were shooting this. And because he had borrowed the camera, stole the head. We did it in Vernon's Pool. I built the stuff for nothing. Just, so as big as the movie is, it was also very small, very intimate. So they were saying dailies for Jaws. And I went, what are they talking about? Jaws is over for a long time. There's no dailies. Well, then they saw that stuff and they go, oh, I guess, and when we saw the screening, the second screening, the audience really went crazy, And I've said this before, when we used to shoot the shark, because it's made so much weird noises with the valves and stuff, after Stephen would cut, the crew would laugh, that funny shark. I always had the fear that the audience was going to laugh at the shark and not scream at the shark. And so when I saw that first screening, and then of course the John Williams music adding
Absolutely,
to it.
Yeah.
You see that in the dailies. And then I realized, oh my God, and the studio realized for the first time, and that's when they decided to make it a first time ever in the summer, a big release, 450 theaters. Now they do 4,000, but that was huge,
Yeah.
So it changed the summer release.
Oh, it changed
then,
cinema. So it changed cinema, yeah.
And then, so you had Jaws, and then a couple of years later, you had Close Encounters and Star Wars and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a Star Wars Close Encounters story I want to tell you.
Oh, no, please tell me.
Okay. Star Wars was done primarily in England with an English art department. And so I was nominated for Academy Award against Star Wars. And George Lucas came to our big set and he said, we never built anything like this. We just built the same sets and we repainted them. But it was so impressive with the effects thing. But anyway, the designer, who was English, got the American Academy Award. But
yeah.
But I got this.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Which was so thankful to the English that against an English designer, they gave me the BAFTA. So
yeah,
it was a big moment in my life.
The work you did on Close Encounters, it's a wonderful film, and even things like practical effects where the dust comes in and you've got the planes at the very beginning, and it's just a fantastic. It repeats really well when you watch it back, and
and the size of the stuff, I mean, it just grew. Let me tell you. Because I scouted Close Encounters by myself, because it was like basically, Stephen was writing it, and I went off looking for all the different mountains, and I found Devil's Tower, which is big, iconic. So it started the same way, just me scouting by myself, and then, the crew adding to it. But the set, the studio said you can have stage 15 and 16 to build the big set, because everything's going to be done on the back lot. So they were thinking a very small movie. And I said, well, it doesn't look big enough. Well, Jaws came out and started to make money. And then John Veach, the head of production at Columbia, said, boy, you guys, you have a big success and you think you could expand this. I said, well, I think this 2 stages, Camelot, I'll make a model, but I don't think it's big enough. So anyway, I made a model to fit that. And then all the executives came around because Columbia really wanted a big hit, and Jaws is making more money, so we have more power. Nothing like relative.
Absolutely.
So I said to them, I think it's a little small. They said, how big do you think it should be? I said, 4 times that. So I made this model. We did a lot of models. So we ended up with this huge set. And I didn't have a clue where I was going to build it, because it was, so we looked all over airplane hangars, and I found 2 of them in Mobile, Alabama, and we expanded it. And so we ended up with this incredible set, and everything we built, we wanted to scale. For an example, when Dreyfuss and Melinda Dillon climb up the mountain to look over and see, that would be green screen today, but I built a 7-story mountain on rollers that we could put in front of a front projection screen. And to this day, Stephen said early part of this year, I got an award from the Art Directors Guild, the Lifetime Achievement. And Stephen appeared in a video saying how great it is. And he said to this day, he's never worked on a set so big. So it's changed. You know, the Bond movies used to make big sets, but with CGI, you just do a little bit here and you green screen it. And so you lost the splendor of this, you know, huge sets. And so that was an experience I don't think that they do too much anymore.
Was just to quickly go back to one last little question about Jaws. Was the license plate during that autopsy of that shark, was that a little joke towards 007 because of what was on the license plate?
I have no idea. That was Steven's idea. He wanted the license plate. And it was, yeah, I can't remember exactly, but it was, yeah, that was funny. And he throws a late, yeah, and they cut open the shark.
Yeah, it's a great scene. What was, because I heard the story that John Carpenter put helicopters in his film so he could fly them because he was a qualified pilot.
Yeah, he was. He used to, but so I never flew with him or anything.
What was that second experience like on Starman, working with him?
Well, that was interesting because he wanted me to design it, and I was still looking for directing jobs. And so I decided to do second unit and do visual consultant. And so I designed some of the spaceships, and then I did the long trips with the second unit, the car driving to the big, was it in Arizona, the site of the, you know, the crater.
Yeah, yeah. It's a highly underrated film. It's got a beautiful score to it as well, especially with the two leads. I'd say it's one of.
I have noise.
Yeah, no problem.
Pardon?
Yeah, so I would say it's a highly underrated film of Carpenter's. It's a beautiful, it's very romantic film, isn't it?
I thought it was good. You know, was an interesting thing. I did a spaceship in that. I was telling somebody earlier today. Let me show you something.
Yeah, cool.
After working on spaceships and wild looking, you know, over the years and Close Encounters, I thought the spaceship, when, you know, they arrive at the crater, the spaceship comes down. So I wanted it so you really couldn't see it. It reflected what's above and reflected. So I got a cue ball and I had it chromed.
I see.
So that was the spaceship. So you didn't see really, do you know what I mean? You saw what was below and what was above. So I had a assistant of mine get it chromed. And it never really came off the way ILM, I think, did the effects. And they sort of ignored my ball.
The idea, like, yeah.
And they made it sort of flat. I thought by using a three-dimensional thing, you know, you put all the images here. Anyway, that's what happens in the business. You get ideas, some of them work and some of them don't.
So you've had quite a interesting schooling in terms of experience on TV and your early films, and obviously Jaws and some others. So and you pursued directing. What was that leap like when you made Jaws 3?
Well, it was very difficult. You know, doing the second unit on Jaws 2 for a director that I was responsible for getting in the job, I pretty was free. I realized how difficult it was sitting there getting shots. You know, you had to be so disciplined, waiting to get the right shot. When I got the job for Jaws 3, people said, well, stay away from the art department, you know. So I went to, and Jeff Corey was an actor. He was sort of in the 50s. He became a coach because with the McCarthy thing, he had done something with, you know. Anyway, a lot of people of some Jack uh, of some note went to see him. So I went and took his class just to see how he worked with actors, and that was helpful. And I really sort of stayed away from the art department and just focused on that. But my big problem was Alan Landsberg, who was the producer, who wanted to get involved with everything. I mean, he tried to give me the first shot. Oh, you did that. I said, no, I'm directing. So I had a very large first assistant, Scott Maiden, about 6'5". I said, just keep him away from me. But basically, he was low budget. He didn't want to build a shark. Said he had a lot of stock units. So he stock, yeah, not stock units.
Stock footage, yeah.
And so his idea was just to do it really cheap. And I sort of really expanded his thinking on it. And I was quite pleased, except I didn't have final cut. So instead of the movie being 2 hours like the other two, he cut 25 minutes out of it so he could get 5 screenings instead of 4 screenings. And so I was highly criticized for expediting the film too much and taking away a lot of the personal relationships. So it got, the critics killed me a little bit on it, but it made a lot of money. And I had a lot of fans of those 3 movies were young people: Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Greg Nicotero. They're all big, and by the time they were like 13, they could go see closer Jaws 3D on their own with glasses. So they became quite vocal about how Jaws movies, the first 3 movies, really influenced their careers. So I have to take that as a bit of a compliment, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Though the critics may have killed me, but there's a lot of people of that age. You know, Dennis, who wrote the book, he's 55. Greg's about 55. So they were, you know, 10 on Jaws, and probably 13, 14 on Jaws, you know, 3. So
what was
anyway, it all worked in the end.
Was it how difficult did you find shooting the underwater sequences? Was that quite a difficult thing?
I'm sorry, the underwater?
The underwater sequences, was it quite a difficult thing to do?
For Jaws 1 or 2 or 3? Which one?
For 3.
Well, what was difficult was the 3D camera. Alan Landsberg wanted us to start shooting 1st of October. I said, we don't have a camera. We have this old camera. And Jimmy Contner was a cameraman who was the assistant cameraman on the first one. He called it the Ultra Jam because it just, so anyway, we shot a week and we were having the cameras made in England for us, 3D cameras, underwater and above. So we shot the first week without the new cameras, and then we got them, so we had to reshoot because, and the convergence, boy, you'd go and the dailies and get the glasses and get the convergence right. It was really difficult. You know, the 3D was a big problem. And then of course the studio then wanted to throw a lot of things out in the, you know, and the one thing
they wanted to do the obvious thing with 3D.
Yeah. The thing that I really wanted was the shark to come right out of the audience. But let me tell you, if it was a snake, it would do it. But it had this fin. And as soon as it hits that, it jumps back. That's where it stops. It doesn't go any further. Mm-hmm. So with the dorsal fin, it didn't allow me to get the shark too much into the audience, just the nose. It was extremely a difficult experience. Alan didn't make it any easier. But you know, we got through it. I had an incredible camera crew. Jim Cotton was good. And I loved my actors. Leah Thompson, she was so cute, you know. It was her very first job. And Dennis. Yeah, you know.
It's a
The gospel.
when I watched it recently, I really enjoyed it. It's kind of obviously the first one's always seen as the film,
Oh
but
yeah.
then the sequels I think are much a lot and like they don't get enough kind of praise, and then they're extremely entertaining. Especially I love the third one with I think it's one the shark and the divers inside his mouth. It's like pretty much gets swallowed whole.
Oh yeah.
It's a great
And it
scene.
was it was a lot of difficult shoot. Where I had the water skiers, and Leah had to learn how. It's amazing. She learned how to climb up on the pyramid and water ski. I had one scary thing where I had built this really fast fin, and we were chasing the whole group of skiers. Now, this is funny because a critic said when you hit one that they all fall. Well, they all do. If somebody falls, you don't drag everybody because they're all connected.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's one critic. Why would everybody fall when one? Because you disconnect. Anyway, their spin was so fast, and the girl it turned and it hit the girl at the very end, and she was just laying there, and Roy and I would think, oh my God, we just killed somebody. They took her to the ambulance, and that was the week that the Twilight Zone. They had the people died. Vic Marlowe was.
yeah, I heard about that.
And
Yeah,
I was thinking, oh my God, because people do die on sets.
yeah,
The stunts have had people. So anyway, she turned out to be okay, but that was scary.
absolutely.
And it was tricky. I got all those water skiers. It was good.
There's a lot. There's a lot on the water. There's when you watch it. There's a lot. There's a lot on screen. Quite a lot on screen. One little technical question. We've got some community questions, and that's how we'll wrap it up. So
Okay.
we've got this. I started a Hellbound Horror Festival, and I've got a few judges involved. And one of them is Alex Proyas, who directed The Crow and Dark City. So I'm going to ask you some community questions as well. But my last little technical question: was it ever when you build a set or you create things that are on screen? Did aspect ratio ever play into it? Whether it was wide CinemaScope or
Oh, well, you constantly, yeah. You, the thing is, well, pretty much was every widescreen. Television, you're working.
the
So
fall
you have
through?
to
Yeah,
think about the aperture is extremely important because that's what you're dealing with. And so the problem you have with a widescreen is negative space.
yeah.
You have two actors, and I mean, I did a thing with four actors on a booth, and how do you get them in? And when they released it on television, they cut it. You didn't see half the
Is
actors.
that the dinner scene in Jaws 3? I think.
Yeah, and when they released it for television, they just chopped off uh, John Putch and Leah, and they yeah.
Yeah, I heard an interview years ago with Sidney Pollock, and he talked about panning and scanning in terms of cropping the center out, and it
Yeah.
just ruins all movies. And uh, films used to be when films like Mutiny on the Bounty and a lot of other widescreen films, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. When you see it now, it's fantastic. But when it used to be broadcast on television, the very first shot and the last shot with the credits, you would see the widescreen, but the rest of the movie was cropped.
Yeah, it was cropped. And if you didn't scan it, you could have actors over here and they just cut it out and yeah, that was that was a problem.
So we've got some community questions. We put a little post out, and when I got this book, I thought, right, I want to make we're taking in film submissions from all over the world. We've got films from Turkey, Australia, South America, US, and it's all horror based for the Hellbound
Yes.
Festival. And so we've had community questions come in. So I've just got to find those. Okay, these are simple ones. So Phil, who I work with at University in Chester, he wanted to know who were your influences when you were starting in the business. Who did you kind of look up to?
Oh, uh, well, David Lean was, I think, was it so he did so many incredible things.
Absolutely.
Obviously Hitchcock, um, but I liked Fellini. I liked a lot of the Antonioni, the the foreign directors for some reason.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Fellini was very influential in his films, I think.
Yeah, 8.5 is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a friend of mine called Leanne. She said she's asked, at what point did you realize that Jaws had scared people for life? Do you know how the kind of generational when they watch it? Like my personal experience when I used to watch it when I was much younger, the opening would scare me almost more than anything else in terms of the camera going through the seaweed and everything.
Yeah.
And when I used to go for a shower when I was a small boy, when I closed my eyes, it was absolutely terrifying. When did you kind of realize the scale of how effective the film was?
Well, you know, when I that first screening and people started to scream, and then over the years, and people would come up to me and say, you know, I can't go in the water. So that was an initial first few months, and then it sort of went away. And then, and, you know, and the thing is, people ask me, "Are you scared of sharks?" Or you, I pick up a script and they say, I need a shark. So that's my project. Or I need a boat, or I need this. So as a designer or director, those are just props. There are things that move around. And if they end up scaring somebody, you know, that was the intent, but they don't necessarily scare you, you know. I mean, I was never afraid. So you're sort of removed from it. Do you understand?
Absolutely, yeah. And like you had that separation from Jaws for many years, and like when you said you watched it at this anniversary showing, that was the
Yes.
first time you really felt the effect of the film.
Exactly, because I was always worried. Did the shark were right there? Did that, you know? Did the blah blah blah? And but when it was so distant, when it was 40 years ago or whatever, you're just and you're sitting on a big screen, you know, again, and you sit back and say, from a director's standpoint, what really worked was the relationship with the guys, you know, and and that was to me what was important. And of course, you wanted the shark to work,
Yeah.
not to look silly, you know. Which all the shots, you know, that were cut in, I think I was very pleased with.
And like you said, when you look at the storyboards, and that's the beauty of this book, you get a real sense of, oh, everything was planned out.
Yeah.
It wasn't broken to the scale that people thought. It was kind of just, it's part of the law of the film now, isn't it? That's not really
Well,
true.
we planned it. I sat down with Stephen, and I did some storyboards on Sugarland, and on Close Encounters, I had a really great illustrator, George Jensen, and he painted the illustrations so that Vilmos Zygmunt, the cameraman, uh, we could see the mothership and the lighting, and it pretty much matched what he photographed. So storyboards are done for content, for action, or for visual impression, you know, if you want to paint them. So Steve and I would talk about every shot, and then I'd go rough and clean them up. So
So
that's what you do.
we've got another question from Phil. What advice would you give to new artists and filmmakers just starting out?
Well, I have a problem with what's happening now. I talk to present day production designers that don't draw. And I think if you want to be a designer, you should draw. I think you should, as best you can, put down on paper what you visualize. And if you need let's say a more detailed, then you find a good illustrator and you work with them. But I think the ability to draw is part of the whole visual thing. Like, okay, let's see, we need a boat. What's the boat look like? Should be, it should have should have this and that, a crow's nest. And so you start making just rough sketches. I could show you in the book rough sketches. You could see them, some early concepts. But I think a visual person should be able to. A lot of people just get it off the computer. Let's see, what does it looks like? And you go and you get all that. That's fine. I do a lot of sculptures, animals. I'm doing a turtle now, and I get all these different turtles, and I look at different shapes. But basically, then I need to draw it. Then I'm going to build it, and so I make it. So that's what I highly would recommend, drawing.
We've got a filmmaker, Ian Rayburn, and his question for you is: did you have a favorite genre of film to work in, production-wise?
A favorite film?
Favorite genre of film to work in during your career?
The thing is, when you're designing in that time, and you just they say you're doing a Western or you're doing a futuristic thing. When I was doing Night Gallery, it was fun. I did this futuristic staircase with Vincent Price in it. And then I did a thing, Sins of the Father, where I had to do Barneo but then, if I'm doing like Geronimo, and I'm doing a Western. So you get into that. I don't really have favorites. You just try to get into it. If you're doing a period piece, you try to adapt to that period and get there. If you're doing futuristic, that's what spend your time. So there's no favorite. Give me a script and I'll make that my favorite at the time,
Absolutely, yeah. And Leanne's husband, Matthew, who he said, can you write his mum a check for the dermatologist because he didn't go near water for years after Jaws?
Yeah, I know.
He told me that he didn't even use the sink.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I know somebody, I had a neighbor said when he was sick, he was psychologically affected by it. I watch some movies and I get claustrophobic. I just saw something and they put these two women in the trunk of a car, and I think, I can't deal with that. That bothers me. Just claustrophobia.
And what this is just my little question. Is there anything for the last 10 to 20 years that you've enjoyed? What are you kind of watching at the moment? What do you kind of like to watch in the cinema or at home?
Well,
is there anything that's kind of stuck out for you?
La La Land, because it reminded me when I was younger of the musicals, and I loved the dancing and the music, and I grew up with Debbie Reynolds and Doris Day and those, and so it was a change. It was suddenly threw me back to that period, and I thought they did a great job of La La Land, and but I get all of these movies for the Academy, and some I'm very impressed with. Why that one just sticks out is because it was so different,
Because you met when we started chatting, you were saying that you love dance, and the energy of the film and that particular director who did Whiplash as well is super talented.
Yeah.
So I've got one more. You're going to show me something? Sorry.
I just want to be sorry I don't forget, because if anybody wants the storyboards, you could contact it on www.joealvesmovieart.com.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah,
you see that? Yeah, Joe Alves Movie Art. Because we sell, they're not that expensive, but they're copies, really good copies of the storyboards. And on these more expensive, I draw a real shark. I mean, original shark. And so
I'm going to be buying one of those.
So yeah, you go online, joealvesmovieart.com, and you'll see storyboards and photographs and stuff like that. Anyway, that's online, and we do ship to England. So
Oh, fantastic.
Okay, I just want to mention that.
I've got. I think that's great. And my fiance, she actually asked, can you buy prints of storyboards? And that's answered that
Oh
question. So
yeah,
that's
you
great.
could, and not only these, and then there's also real quick the early, these here with
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah those. There's about 9 of those, and they're about that big charcoals, and so they're reproduced quite well. So anyway,
I would love to see a future book of, or at least if you did the boards for Escape from New York. I think that would be tremendous.
we're Titan. We're dealing with that right now.
Oh, fantastic.
Another thing Dennis is dealing with is when we first met, he was going to write a Jaws book, and then he started talking to me, and he decided to write a biography. So starting with when I was 19 at Disney's in the 50s, working with Hitchcock and Steven and so it's really a chronicle of the time and the studio systems and how you were when you first hired. There was the regulars, and they would hire you when you were a young guy, and you worked until that picture was over. My Fair Lady, you did some stuff. Okay, that's over. Goodbye. So then you go to another studio, and so the biography reflects really the time and how it used to be under the studio system, where today in the 70s, you pretty much, as a designer or whatever, you have to get an agent to get the good jobs. And that's how it changed.
Well, Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've got one more question for you, but
Sure.
I'm gonna just tie it up. I'm gonna stop the recording and then ask you that. And it's just a very small request. But Joe, this has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for your hard work, and obviously, especially on Jaws, and for me, Escape from New York. It's tremendous, and this is the kind of book that it should be recommended reading in terms of if you want to get into filmmaking, if you want to look at the creative process, because it's that's the reason I asked you about the location scouting photography, because it's in this book. It's not just the design like a lot of other pre-production books. So there's so much to this. So
Yeah,
thank you
Dennis
very
did a
much.
really, yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Joe.
All
And
right.
this has been an absolute pleasure. So I'm just going to stop the recording.